Separate topic, more towards economics. 5 years ago, it was, why does a terabyte cost that much? I can go down to Costco and buy it for $100. Now it's, why does a server cost me $10,000 in a colo space when I can rent it for $1 an hour? How is the economics of the cloud changing how colocation and even building your own facility changing? How is the cloud affecting that part of the economics?
The good thing to always remember is the cloud is in colocation. So, I mean, you just start there. The economics of what the overlay is and what they offer is, yes, you can buy a certain instance for $1, and then it goes from there. And with each individual instance in the service, because you know the cloud, and I talked to Manon about this the other day. I'm going to have her answer the rest of this. The cloud's a great word because the cloud is something here, and underneath that is something like Cloud Plus or Cloud Less, and then there's managed service, and then there's different companies that play in different arenas. And from my perception, all of this sits in colocation. All of this is baseline to what we sell. We have a number of cloud providers that reside in our data centers. And the thing that is at some point, everybody that runs a business or that's senior in sales or senior in engineering looks at the opportunity and says, you know, that's not cloud, that's managed service. That's not managed service, that's something that Rackspace should be doing, or, you know, along these lines. But I'm going to hand this to Manon and have her give a little flavor because I know she's an expert on this.
Why?
So John and I have already had conversations similar to this already, so I'm not really sure to what extent I can expand on what Tim just said, other than there are absolutely a million types of cloud, and so I think by lumping them into what's considered by providers to be a private deployment or a managed dedicated environment where you aren't paying by the hour for the service, but in essence you're having somebody, you're paying a different way for your infrastructure, you're procuring, you know, differently for your service. Or if you take all of the components of that private cloud and share it, some of the components to offset some of the costs and call it multi-tenant, or you can have the Amazon side of the stick where it really is swiping the credit card and paying for what you use, utility-based service. I'm not really sure how to answer your question exactly, other than depending on what each individual situation, how each individual situation plays out. I mean, it's just a matter of the balance sheet and how, you know, from a financial perspective, how your organization wants to be paying for the same services that they're using, and to what extent you want to own and control things that are going to be sitting either in your backyard or in someone else's backyard. It's not magic, it's the same technology, so it's just working through how you want to pay for it.
Just real quickly, I think specifically it comes back to, and I think Bill had mentioned, it's how much do you trust your crystal ball, right? And it's a year and a half out, 18 months out, 2 years out. What do you think that data is going to do, and what do you need it to do, right? And I think, you know, we talk about data centers and we talk about, you know, systems and networks, but it's really around getting back to what do you need the data for, what do you need it to do, and how long do you need it, right? And so when we come back at that, you know, specifically in healthcare, you know, you guys have to keep things longer in some cases, and then there's some stuff you want to get rid of, right? So that might be where you segment. You're like, well, you know what, I need to keep this stuff for 25 years and this stuff for 3. This stuff's vital, you know, I can manage it one way. So I think it comes back to helping educate the organization that bits and bytes aren't all created equal. And that becomes one of the hardest things I see coming out of the IT world is this has changed so much in the IT world. Now, how do you get the business to actually understand big picture where it's going and why it's different, and why do I have 3 different providers who might do what the business world's going to look at as the same thing for me? And you're like, because this person does this well, and then you see their eyes glaze over as you start talking about different regulations. So we have to figure out how to better educate, I think, the business end with how fast things are going, because these are major investments that people are making in a shorter time period. You know, because it's moving so fast. That would be my only thing I would
I would just add to that, the point that you made about buying disk space, at Best Buy versus, from EMC. It's, a lot of that just has to do with all of the other components that are wrapped into that cost, right? So the facility and the systems and the monitoring and the management and the tools and the experience and all of those pieces that go into that cost. And then additionally, within virtualized environments, and the replication that goes into that, it's not just sitting in one location anymore. You're creating multiple virtual machines and replicating it throughout. So there's more redundancy that's built into each of those gigs as well.
Further questions? Right here.
I'm curious about your opinion on what the elasticity of the cloud really is. It seems to me that, and it's just opinion, right? But it seems to me that everybody wants that push of capacity at the same time, generally speaking. So is there really, and I know with AWS typically, when you read the fine print, there's not a lot of SLA behind some of that. You kind of have so much room, and if you use it up, you're out of luck. So
I think Bryan's ready.
what do you think?
Yeah, sorry not to hog the mic, but it keeps coming this way. So it's interesting if you look at the cloud itself. That's one of the value propositions, right? It's this utility billing model. It's infinite elasticity. I think there are a couple of cases to it. One is, and this goes back to choosing your provider, doing your homework and research on that. There are many, and Amazon is kind of a great model in that if I'm trying to prototype something or I'm a startup company, economically they're going to be a cheap solution. But when I hit that critical mass or that tipping point, or where I in turn have customers relying on the service that I'm running on that cloud and I have my own SLAs to meet, how am I both architecting my system to take advantage of that? B, even from an elasticity, the fact that I can maybe horizontally scale something, is my platform capable of doing that? Am I going to run out of connections, or is IOPS and access to the storage layer going to become a problem? So I think there are other components that go into that. And not to be a pitch on our side, but our focus on enterprise is to make sure that we can guarantee that type of performance and capability. So continue to provide an environment that's not oversubscribed, where we're measuring and capacity planning to make sure that we have that ability to spin up on demand or triple a customer's environment without impeding on the demand or resource availability of other customers, is built into our platform, built into our SLAs, because customers that are looking for that elasticity in our space that we go after, they're also looking for that guarantee to make sure it is available when I do need it. I don't want to pay for reserved instances or be kind of cast into specific instance types and then just hope it's available when I need it. So I think it's multifaceted. Is my application such that I can really scale to the needs of a Zynga and not fall over? And B, will my provider actually have that capacity when I need it? Or are they running hot already? Please.
I could also jump in on this one, that this is, again goes back to the whole issue of, I remember one customer when they started talking about the cloud, at one of these cloud discussions, and they said, wow, this means Schneider Electric will be out of business because everything will be in the cloud. And the reality is that the cloud does actually touch the ground somewhere. And where the cloud actually touches the ground, it needs the dynamic expanse capability in terms of the elasticity we're talking about, deals with, to a large extent, how elastic the physical infrastructure can be, whether or not it is here or in Wenatchee or some other part of the world. One of the areas we're also looking at here is how dynamic the cloud becomes. There's a demand response concept in terms of, I don't know if you heard about the electrical grid looking at this, and what you may see in the future is, this was unheard of in the past, but you may see utilities actually giving a huge premium to the IT to be able to migrate their location of their compute, or where the cloud's touching the ground, into a whole different environment. This is different than what you're talking about, but it ties in, because as you expand the capacity and you look at all network capacities being maybe unified and brokered by a limited number of players, then I go back to the search engine provider. Google very much may get huge incentives to move their search engine operations for 6 hours out of the day from one location to another. All these other forces, in fact, I was talking to somebody about the cloud will change the power grid. The cloud, there's You got an industry where steel mills, if you have to change production or if the electricity or whatever, you can't move steel, but you can move IT. And the relationship between IT and our electrical infrastructure around the world is going to become an interesting phenomenon, and may tie into also the capacity needed for elasticity. Kind of tied in that, there was another company in Eastern Oregon. I asked them their design for their data center. What happens if it fails? And they said, well, if this data center fails, all its functions fail over to another data center. Instead of going for high availability on their data center, they just assumed that it was going to fail, and that all the excess, all their functions would be picked up by another data center. So designing data center capacity for redundancy was an intriguing concept to me. They don't need a lot of the things we're talking about, and if they have a fire in East Oregon, they'll just shut the door and shut down the plant, and it'll impact their cooling design. These are some interesting aspects that deal with elasticity very much.
Can I follow up on?
Go ahead.
I was going to follow up. You know, you look at the cost of transport bandwidth that's falling over time, and that failover model becomes much more applicable. Why are we building out data centers today, you know, to this redundant tier 3 or even a higher specification? It seems like people are saying, you want more redundancy, a better way to go about it is to stick in a normal commercial office building, so to speak, without the generators, and just have 2 or 3 of them, you know, to fail amongst. Cost of servers are coming down, cost of your equipment's going up over time. So the infrastructure play might not be there in the future. Do you see it changing? Data centers becoming less robust?
Great question, and it's one that I think about quite frequently. And I see right now I'm still seeing kind of what I call a bifurcation in the marketplace. You have the search engine, the resilient customers, they have very simple processes and can fail over very nicely. And if Google lost a search engine data center, all you notice is maybe searches took a couple seconds longer or something like that, and it wouldn't necessarily change their business model. But a lot of the enterprise functions, they still, they're so integral. Your IT functionality is so integral to your organization's lifeblood that the threat of that is a challenge. Now, what you're bringing up, I've asked people the same questions, and there's a lot of legacy stuff out there that has no plans on being virtualized or migrated to the cloud, and that's still going to define a core function. And once you have those, the need for any size of a data center, the question is, well, how much more do you want to put? So kind of what we're talking about here is there's going to still be I think if we're talking the 3-year vision, for the 3-year vision, we're not going to see a major change in the need for enterprise. We're seeing SMB, small, medium business. A lot of those guys are looking at their costs, and they're actually taking it to exactly what we're saying, the colo environment. The major companies that still have to invest to a large extent, they're still buying their data centers. Will that change? It's going to change somewhat, but there's still going to be a core enterprise function that's going to be hosted in the traditional company data centers. But more and more of it's going to be kind of parasited off in maybe colos or some sort of cloud expansion program.
One of the things we're seeing is actually, again, if you get to the enterprise size customer, and we'll talk to federal government, we'll talk to large, we're actually seeing the opposite. We're actually seeing them go to mega data centers. So whereas dispersed systems were all the rage, let's say for 10 years, the last 10 years, let's get our data dispersed. We're actually seeing, so what's federal government, I think they're consolidating 800 data centers over the next 3 years, 5 years, something like that. So we're also seeing that with systems integrators, where you're seeing like CSC go into super data centers, right? So a lot of them are now saying, okay, I need so much power, so much complexity in some of my systems that I'm just going to bring all my talent in because it's a pure cost savings play for them. So I think to your point, it's completely dependent on size of organization, but we're seeing there's a lot of industry that is not going to make a huge push into the cloud for a majority of what we'll call data processing or their core data, and we'll talk financial. You know, there's some cloud services that make sense for them, but for them, they prefer nothing leave their walls, right? They want to keep it there. Healthcare similarly, right? They're going to get pushed towards more open systems, meaning people, the federal government's going to push on, hey, we want you to share client data, but they're like, no, we really prefer to keep it all in ours. And those are huge data growth areas that they don't really want to let out of their area. So I think you're going to see a bifurcation a little bit. You're going to see those people who have processes or have data sizes that fit a cloud model, and you're going to see some people go, I'm going to bring a whole bunch in-house, and the stuff I parse out to the cloud is going to be minuscule in comparison to what you see in those major data centers.
I was going to add to that a little bit that I was having a conversation with Max here just a few minutes before we started, that there's a lot of consolidation, just as you indicated in the marketplace, where people are carrying 9 data centers worldwide, and with the infrastructure as it is today, with the connectivity and low latency, increased bandwidth for pennies on the dollar, that those things are affordable to consolidate into a more handleable, manageable architecture, and that coupled with that, they are also taking a look at key partners and doing business not with the all Nordstrom flavored data centers. They want a little bit of high class, they want a little bit of mid class, want a little bit of low class, depending on their applications. So you'll see a lot of consolidation in the marketplace today, and choosing key partners to do business with on a worldwide or domestic US or South America, etc.
One other area that ties into this is the comfort factor with security, in terms of the whole network security concept. So you are seeing, in the use of the term cloud, there's a lot of companies that are moving to cloud, but they're moving to internal clouds, where they basically own and run the whole dang thing. And they're still putting it in, probably in their facilities, or in some cases they're having someone help sponsor that. But I don't know if anyone else wants to comment on how the marketplace is absorbing the security concern. We talked about that briefly with data, but there's a whole lot more just with general processes.
I was going to say this could be a huge topic when we talk about security and virtualization in general, but to Don's point, we've seen, especially in the enterprise space, where there's a move to virtualize services. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm running to the public cloud to take advantage of those economies, right? I'm still trying to find ways to run more dense architecture and leverage that. Moving to virtualization provides me portability within my infrastructure and easily leverage a network of data centers or disparate locations, right? A lot of companies, even switching hats, we as a consumer of co-location services in multiple data centers around the world, we're looking for ways we can leverage kind of what we would call micro-pop or kind of even metro cluster type of scenarios where we have a number of small systems or small sets of systems that can easily be networked together. But that security element, especially for a lot of the enterprise companies, is still relevant. So the physical security, still leveraging those types of co-location facilities that provide that element, as well as then looking at the data protection. My governance around data at rest and data in flight, and how am I kind of managing those, both from a virtualization perspective, from a IDS and IDP perspective. There's a whole suite of services that go around that don't go away, in fact become even more important when I'm looking at what systems can I move to the cloud or leverage that type of cloud service.
Excellent questions, and I think now we were scheduled to take a break, so why don't we break until 3:45?